The J tube, so it's going to be laparoscopic most likely. So there will be an incision here, 2 incisions here, and then the incision for the J tube, which will be right around here. I don't even know how to start this video. I feel so many conflicting feelings. Maybe they're not conflicting, maybe they're all working together. I don't know, but I think...
Well, there's a lot of emotions tied up in this moment, you know?
I was thinking, this is the first, I'm trying to think if this is true. This is the first, like, good, okay, so like things like, I used to be discharged from the hospital after weeks in the hospital. I used to be discharged, and oftentimes it wasn't because I was all better. It was because there's nothing more they could do. I'm gonna go home and continue the same routine at home. My lung function was down. I was just being discharged because that's all there was to do. And it wasn't like this grand celebration, because it was like, we're going home just to feel the same amount of horrible as we did in the hospital. Like, this particular moment actually is a celebration. It's a saying goodbye to something because of good news, right?
Yeah. Okay, tell them what's happening.
Oh, well, they know from the title.
That's true.
I am taking my feeding tube out today. I got the information that I needed from the surgeon who placed it. He's at a different hospital. I'm at a different hospital. And I talked with his team about my feeding tube, and basically, like, if I were to need it again in the future, could they use that same surgical area that they created inside? They created this pouch, and they basically said, yeah, they should be able to use it again. But thankfully that's years down the road, hopefully. And so the future question has been answered with a probably. And then they basically just said, take the button out, and in 3 to 4 weeks, if it doesn't stop leaking, AKA if it doesn't close up well enough on its own, we could do a small surgical procedure. So, hoping that my stoma, which is what is called, like, the hole in my abdomen is my stoma, the stoma will hopefully close by itself. Okay, I think part of what feels so weird is when I had this placed 5.5 years ago, I remember them saying right after the surgery, if this thing falls out, run, don't walk, run to the closest emergency room. I guess the reality is these little suckers close up fast. And so my surgery was a little more complicated. They were doing, like I mentioned, like a pouch inside my jejunum, part of my intestine. It's been a good feeding tube, like it's short, so I've never dealt with a clog. I know a lot of people with J tubes, because J tubes are typically like long inside the intestine. Mine's short because they made that pouch. I've never had a clogged feeding tube. It doesn't have to be flushed every 2 hours like a typical J tube. I flush it once a day. Of course, when I was on feeds, that's a different story. But the reality is, I am taking this thing out, and I got the okay from my CF doctor, my liver doctor, my registered dietitian, my cystic fibrosis dietitian. Like, everybody is like, yes and amen, let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, we could have taken it out a couple years ago.
Probably, I mean, yeah, I could. Yeah.
But like, there was just like a lot of unknowns. Like, is this stability going to last? And we're at 3 months on Trikafta.
3 whole months?
3 years on Trikafta. And the stability continues through viruses and ups and downs. And this is a moment that marks stability.
Yes.
And this feeding tube was a tool that really marked a lack of stability.
It really was a time where my body really looked unwell. We knew it was unwell on the inside because my body was fighting so hard and my weight was it was too low, I looked really unwell. And it's kind of hard, it's very hard to look back at videos of that time or pictures of that time because it was so visual. Well, plus I was coughing and I felt terrible the whole time. But all of that to say, there were still beautiful times in those years. Like we've always said, life doesn't stop when you go in the hospital. Life doesn't stop when
you get a feeding tube.
Yeah, you get a feeding tube or you feel terrible.
Yeah.
I think the other part, my brain's gonna jump around a whole lot because I want to process this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for myself, I need to process this because it, in a way, okay, a couple things. A couple million things to share. One is we've kept this going for 5.5 years, so it feels really wrong to take it out. Like, after I take it out, I'm just gonna be like, okay. No, I'm gonna be so happy. I'm probably gonna run around and I'm gonna be so happy. But I think part of living with cystic fibrosis, part of the reality of having been really sick, thankfully I'm stable now, is this question of what if? Well, what if in the future? What if, and that's how it was for the last 3 years. We didn't know, you know, Trikafta is an extremely new medication. The people who've been on it the longest were on it for the clinical trial. And that started, I think, about a year to 18 months before I was on it. So I've been on it for 3 years. So those people have probably been on it for 4.5 years. And so it's extremely new. There are a lot of unknowns with Trikafta. And so when I first started it, you know, on day 11 or something, when we noticed I'm doing better, we were like, well, maybe this is a fluke. Then at 30 days in, we did PFTs and my PFTs had gone up. Yeah. Well, they're doing really well right now, but we don't know what if this or that. And that's because of the reality of, you know, 29 years of CF decline and the realities of cystic fibrosis in my body.
I'm gonna sit in that chair because I'm squatting. And this is turning into a longer video than
Sorry.
I thought.
And there's always gonna be what ifs.
Yeah.
There's never gonna be a guarantee. I think for Peter and I, seeing my body being stable for 3 years gives our brains the peace of mind to say, goodbye feeding tube.
Yeah.
You've been good. And I was thinking that is one way I could really like process it, to be like, dear feeding tube, I really didn't want you.
Yeah.
You marked a really hard time. And now, goodbye. Yeah, we really did try to fight against the hostility against each new medical intervention that had to happen during my sickest years. Like when I came out of that bronchoscopy and my lungs couldn't oxygenate, which they typically did oxygenate well, and I was on oxygen for however long that was. It was a short time in the hospital, but it was like, this is what I need right now. And we tried not to be like, oh, this is so sad. We tried to say like, this is a tool in the tool belt. And then when the feeding tube came, this is a tool in the tool belt. And it was, and it really was. I mean, that thing didn't stop me. I remember going to the petting zoo where these deer were with my feeding tube on, and like, it didn't stop me. And I learned to pull that little tube to the side so it didn't get caught on doorknobs, and you just learn to live life with it. And you view it, at least the way we viewed it was, this tool is fueling my body so that I can fight and I can live, and let's do this. And
yeah, I think that's an important piece to this whole moment, because I think from the outside perspective, it might be like, what's the big deal about getting rid of the feeding tube? Like it was this thing detracting from your life. But in many ways, this was a tool that really helped us in those years and helped give Mary's, I mean, I remember like her weight stabilizing and like as a result of the feeding tube, and just even the peace of mind that it brought to Mary and I in that because oh my goodness, it's bringing back the memories of how stressful food was.
It was so hard.
It was really hard, and the feeding tube was like in many ways a gift to our family, and like just this tool in the tool belt to help us live and help us help Mary's body fight. And
while I was really sick and didn't have an appetite, and Peter would be watching me waste away, and my body couldn't consume enough food, I didn't have an appetite, my spleen and liver are enlarged, there's nowhere for my stomach. Like, there are reasons why my appetite was low, but it was just so hard to watch. And so Peter would be trying to feed me. I wouldn't be in the mood for anything, so then I would feel bad to say no. He's eating meals alone. Like, there's just a lot. There was a lot during that season, a half a decade ago, that we are so grateful to be past. And I think the other part of it all is that we didn't think we would be past it.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't think that would ever end. We thought, well, now I have a feeding tube. But Trikafta has done more in my body than we ever anticipated, and it has sustained. And like Peter mentioned earlier, even through the last 3 years when I've gotten really pretty sick, like my body's caught a cold or a virus, and like, whoa, back to the sick days, right? But it only lasts a couple of weeks, and it's not what it used to be, thankfully. So we are stepping into just this season of like, this is, although there is no guarantee, we are just fully living in the gratefulness of stability. And because of the stability, it enabled us to make an informed decision to get rid of the feeding tube. Whereas if I had taken it out like 6 months after I started Trikafta, oh, 6 months in, I'm doing well, let's get rid of it. I think part of it is that the surgery was so hard. Like, I had post-op complications, and the surgery took like hours long. It wasn't just a it was laparoscopic, but it wasn't just a like a G tube that you like pop through the skin into the stomach. It was like 4 or 5 hour long surgery, and my body had complications and all of that. But because of that, it's not just like oh, let's pop it back in. I know that it will, it actually probably will be simple.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm like nervous that it would be really hard.
Well, yeah. And I think in our minds, like in the past 3 years about the feeding tube, it's like, while Mary does an amazing job doing the maintenance of like taping it and doing gauze every day, it's not a huge problem to do that. So might as well keep it around.
Yeah, and I was using it every single day for medication. I was on a liquid medication that tasted terrible, and I'm just not needing that anymore. And if I do need it, I can get it down. It's no problem. It's just funny because back in the day I said, oh, I never want that in my mouth again. It's lactulose, if you've ever been on it. So, and also like side benefits of having a feeding tube, whenever I needed a CAT scan with liquid contrast, I could put it through my feeding tube, and I was like living a life. I was like, I don't have to drink that. Guess I have to drink it from now on. I'm okay with that, I'll take it. So let's do this. If you've ever seen our, what is it, 1.5 million views, I don't know.
I think it has 2 million views.
2 million view video where we changed my feeding tube. I was laying on this exact table, but in a different state. We were living in Massachusetts at the time. So even though I don't need to lay on the table, I'm totally gonna do it just for old time's sake with
I think
redoing this.
I think it's funny
Did I have like a cushion or something?
I don't know. But I think it's funny that one of our first videos that was really like a medical education video was how to access a porta-cat video, and it wasn't this table, but Mary was laying on a table. It was a really awkward angle. She was like upside down. And anyways, lots of people around the world have watched and found that video. We come across nurses all the time who are like, wait, I think I've watched your video about how to access a porta-cat.
Were you laying on a table?
Yes, they always say, wasn't it a weird angle? Yes. So anyways, Mary's gonna lay on the table.
Let's take a few pictures first.
Okay.
We need to make a thumbnail and stuff like that.
Okay.
Business first.
Stay tuned.
It's really not, it's gonna be anticlimactic.
Yeah, because you do this every few months to change the tube, but It's the minutes afterward where you aren't sticking anything into the hole.
And so if you are a child who's watching and you're curious about feeding tubes, or you have one and you're nervous about changing it or taking it out, here's what you do. Take the water out with the syringe, which is a balloon inside that holds it in place. And then I'm just gonna pull it out.
Wait, I can't see. Oh, there we go.
It's whistling.
Oh my goodness. So basically, it's a body piercing. Like Mary has a hole in her skin, and for those of you who've had earrings where you haven't put the earrings in and the hole's closed up, that's basically what's going to hopefully happen with this.
There was no juice.
Look at that.
Oh, that's so weird. I never just leave it like this. Hey, that's pretty crazy. I want to look at it.
Look at that.
Of course I'm wearing my every breath is a gift, because that's true.
It is true.
Oh, wow.
Let me see it.
That is so interesting.
There it is. It's your little stomach piercing.
And when I say there she blows, she really did blow.
Yeah, like, she whistled.
That is so crazy. Look at that. I'm free.
You're free.
I'm free.
The other thing with this is that it was a family decision, in that Elijah has been wanting to pull out Mary's feeding tube lately.
He's been noticing it. And like, his grasp is very strong. I thought about taking the water out of the balloon and just letting him pull it out.
Yeah. So that really prompted, in many ways, this discussion. Mary's kind of like, Elijah's gonna pull this out. Speaking of Elijah, I think he just woke up from his nap.
Let's go get him.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Look at this.
Let's go get him.
Okay.
No problem. Let me just jog up these stairs.
With no feeding tube. Hi, bud. Did you have a good nap? Oh, guess what? We took out Mama's feeding tube. Yeah. So good.
Hey,
well,
thanks for celebrating with us.
And
as always,
we'll see you next time.
bye guys.
Bye.
Bye, Ollie boy.
Bye, Ollie boy.